Hey YouTube, how's it going? I should say right off the bat, this shit is probably going to get heavy. If you're not in the mood to examine the darker sides of life, or especially if you are someone that suffers with depression yourself and you're feeling vulnerable today, this video ain't going to make you feel happy, okay? Having said that, I'm making it for selfish reasons. A couple of people have expressed interest in knowing what it's like in a mental unit, but it's, for me, to be honest with you, it's cathartic for me. Because I experienced it, and because I don't think of myself as someone that's massively abnormal, I now know that it isn't as an abnormal experience as other people think it is. I'm not going to lie to you, it's fucked. It's fucked up. But they're normal people having problems. Okay, I'm going to assume that you're joining me after watching my depression video, which kind of gives you a sense of how I got here in the first place. But as it stands, I've spent 2 weeks in a children's ward, and I'm on my way to my first ever mental hospital. And we're in the car with my mum. And I have no idea whatsoever what a mental unit is going to be like. When I picture it, I see a long ward in my mind, with single beds with white sheets all the way down the ward on either side, with patients tied to the beds, restrained in the beds, screaming, crying, yelling. I'm terrified and I'm also excited. I'm someone that wanted to see that part of human nature, but I'm terrified for my own safety. We get there and it looks like an old people's home. It's got carpets, sofas, a TV, except everything's got this weird kind of clinical feel, you know, that kind of, you know, those horrible patterns of curtains and stuff that you get in hospitals. It has this weird decor like that. There are people around the fringes that are attempting to hide, but there are only these two really brightly lit rooms, and they have CCTV cameras in them. So there's really nowhere that you can get away from the constant observation. Still, people huddle on the sofa with blankets or hoods up, or try to distract themselves mentally, draw pictures. There were 3 girls on the sofa, I remember watching a Muse video on TV and saying how much they liked Muse, and that's when I started to think it would be okay, because at the time I was 15 years old and I was so narrow-minded that, you know, encountering other people that liked rock music was probably a good sign. But I made friends with those girls pretty quickly, and it amazed me because I'd never felt accepted before, but there was this sense that we were all equals, we were all sharing an experience, that we all remembered what it was to be real human beings, and now we'd lost the power, we were in it together. There was really a sense of patience against nurses, of fighting the system, you know, every way you could, of resisting every way you could, defending viciously your tiny freedoms. You know, when someone chooses when you go to bed and how much of your food you eat, and that you'll sleep with the door open with the light on in the hallway, or even with a nurse sitting at the door, depending on what kind of behaviours you've been exhibiting, how dangerous they judge you to be. When you've lost all of those freedoms, it suddenly becomes really important to have, like, we didn't have butter knives to put jam on our bread. We had to use these plastic spoons, and you could snap these disposable plastic spoons, and they would make pretty sharp edges, and we'd spend all of our time trying to find ways to get around what we weren't allowed to have. You weren't allowed sharp objects, so of course everyone had sharp objects. There was even a kind of black market amongst these teenage self-harming girls. You know, if someone would manage to sneak a packet of razor blades in, because when you went in and out they would always search your bags and all your pockets and everything, but obviously not very well, and they wouldn't search in your bra, or, you know, go so far as a cavity search or whatever. I know obviously you don't really want to be sneaking razor blades in cavities, you know what I mean. Anyway, you could get sharps in, you could get even drugs in. I used to get stoned in the next unit I went to, which is a bit more lax because I wasn't always supervised when I was smoking, but in this place it wouldn't have been possible. I feel like I'm not giving you the experience the way it was. I'm not helping you to... I think the one thing that really got to me was the injustice of not being able to kill myself. I realised then, and you should realise now, that we don't actually have a choice of whether or not to live. If you choose not to live and other people find out about it, they're going to stop you choosing not to live. That means it isn't your decision whether or not you're alive. And it sounds really morbid, but the idea that I'm able to kill myself as a kind of get out of jail free option, the last ditch attempt, is quite comforting to me. Living a world of Catholic beliefs where you believe you're going to go to hell for eternity, and I think it is something I believed at the time, even though I was never religious. The only thing that really would stop me killing myself was a fear that it would only be more like this, eternity, but without the option of suicide. There were people with lots of different problems in the unit. Depression was overwhelmingly the most common. It's called the common cold of mental illnesses. It's really common. 1 in 3 people is going to suffer from depression at some point in their lives. Firstly, I'll describe some of the various illnesses to you, because so we had depression, and most of us would spend most of our time either not talking, sitting in a corner huddled, wishing they were dead, or talking to other people about how much they wish they were dead. And then there were people that suffer with a condition called psychosis. Psychosis is to hear voices and experience visions. It tends to be a short-term period thing. It's not the same as schizophrenia. Schizophrenia tends to be quite a long-term problem. It tends to represent a kind of total dismantling of logical connections in the mind. Psychosis is different, and I really felt for people with psychosis because I knew some of the kindest, nicest, most normal people with psychosis. I knew a guy who was just lovely to the depressed people. He would always want to know how you were, be willing to talk to you about how you were, and every so often he'd start going, no, 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 and holding his hand to his head like that. And he could hear voices in his mind telling him to do things like hurt the person that he's speaking to, or telling them to tell them that they're a fucking bitch, or he could hear constant compulsions in his mind to do bad things. And it was so awful to see, because he was the kindest human being. And lots of people were like that. They were the most normal people to talk to, apart from when you could tell that they were hearing things that you weren't able to hear. And medication for those people usually proved quite effective. Usually I can't remember what it's called now. Usually a certain drug would stop those kind of voices for long enough for the person to get a kind of enough help in therapy to not hear those voices when they came off of the medication. Some of those people made really quick recoveries, and they were kind of a bit hated almost by the depressed people who knew that they were in it for the long haul. Some people had problems that you couldn't even tell what the problem was. There was a girl who would never talk to anyone and would just talk to herself all the time, and spent 90% of the time sitting on the sofa masturbating. It was quite an uncomfortable thing, really. I mean, it sounds like a funny situation, but it didn't feel funny. It felt really, really awkward to be sitting there in a group meeting and have someone masturbating and have to kind of pretend that... And she wouldn't moan or enjoy herself at all. She would just do it. Kind of just a constant movement with her hand. Someone was there because of anger problems. He got angry all the time about... He would be the calmest, nicest person, and then he would just lose the plot about things and put his foot through the TV. And nearly everyone was on medication. Nearly everyone. I mean, didn't really have a choice. Okay, I seem to be reaching my time limit. I'm probably going to put up 2 videos on this subject today, so if you have any interest, hit up part 2. If you don't have any interest, sorry.